So, you know how yesterday I was going to do my Western Conference prediction video right after when I finished the CCL review? Well, what I actually meant was I was going to delay this video for a day and basically do the Western Conference prediction video right now. So, without further ado, that's what I'm going to be doing right now. As today, I'm going to put all 13 teams and see where exactly I predict them going to be finished in the standing by the end of this season. And by the way, I also did the Eastern Conference prediction back on Monday, and if you haven't watched that video, I'll leave a link in the description below for you to watch that video alongside with this video of me talk about where each of these MLS team in the Western Conference is going to finish this season. So without further ado, let us actually begin with the team that I think unfortunately is going to finish dead last this season in the West. And that, of course, is going to be RSL. So I mentioned this before in the expectation index, where I really think RSL is not only rebuilding on the pitch, but they're also rebuilding off the pitch and even in the executive branch of this team, with the way that they're still looking for a new owner in this team. And they're also still trying to reshuffle the front office after the you-know-what situation happened last year with this team. But on the pitch itself, yeah, when you look at this team, you can clearly see that this team is nowhere near to be a team that could win a lot of games this season. I mean, the only guys that I think on this team could maybe be starting quality in MLS are guys like Damar Krylak and Albert Rusnak, and that is if both of those guys can bounce back after a tough season that they have last year. And then also you're really banking the fact that Bobby Wood could be a guy that, now that he's actually going to be coming to this RSL team sooner than we thought, that he could maybe rediscover some of that good form that he had a couple of years ago, and what was considered one of the hottest prospect and a guy that was supposed to replace Clint Dempsey in the national team. Because if he is not able to do that, and if the attack once again struggle, and the same goes with the midfield and the defense, yeah, this is going to be a really long season for RSL. And that, I think, when they do eventually find an owner, maybe that's when they kind of start this rebuild, where this new ownership will start to maybe get some signings to hope to improve this team. And also maybe they're gonna look to try to hope that their academy is gonna once again produce a couple of good players that is gonna be in the starting 11 in this team. Because one thing we know about RSL is that this is one of the team that always rely heavily on their academy, and always hope that some of the players that come out of the academy can not only be a regular starter for this team, but also be a player that can be a decent player for this team. So yeah, let's just hope maybe that is going to be the route that they're going to head in terms of their rebuild. But again, I feel like this could be a long season for RSL. Now, another team that is also going to be in a rebuild, and the team that I predict finish in 12th place, is the Houston Dynamo. Now, this is kind of technically their second year of this deep rebuild that they had, although, I'm pretty sure they're saying that the rebuild technically hasn't really started, and that there actually isn't even a rebuild, because, for the past 2 years, we've been kind of retooling our squad to try to once again compete in the Western Conference. And it seemed like this year, when you look at some of these signings, it seems like they're once again trying to feel like they're just retooling by getting some of these guys like Tim Parker, Joe Corona, Ruti, and also Fafa Pico, and that they think maybe those are going to be enough of some of the signings that, or enough of those signings that they made in the offseason can get themselves back to playoff contention. But for me, I don't think so. I think most of these signings are pretty much just placeholder or reclamation project, unless if all those signings turns out to be an absolute hit, and somehow their attack can actually find someone to actually score the goals. Because I know for a fact that when you look at this team, ever since when Albert Feliz and Mauro Manotas was sold for this team, they just could not score goals and have nobody that can bang the goal for this team. But unless if somebody unknown that actually is able to do so, I don't think this Dynamo team is going to be a very good team, and that I think they're probably going to be one of those teams that's going to finish near the bottom of the Western Conference. Now, in 11th place, and I know Galaxy fans are not going to be happy that I'm going to put them very low in the standings, and they think that I'm I'm a Quakes fan that is clearly being biased in terms of this prediction and decided to put them very low in the table. But for me, I think the Galaxy probably is not going to do very well and finish pretty low in the table, mainly because this is a transitional year for the Galaxy. I mean, this is a team that, when you look at the way that now Greg Vanney is taking over this team, and we heard about how he's already have a project in terms of trying to develop this team to be not only be a playoff contender but also get themselves back to be an MLS Cup contender that they were in the early 2010s. But for now, I just think when you look at the team that he has to work with, yeah, it's definitely not one of the best Galaxy team, and especially the way that last season they lost their best attacker in Christian Pavone. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not, if anybody on that attack is going to replace him. I mean, they did sign a French winger called Samuel Grincer that they're hoping he could be the next Roman Alessandrini and could be also maybe the guy that replaced Pavone in that spot. But still, unless if he can of course do so, and also if Chicharito can actually live up to the price tag that he has, which is a huge if. I don't think this team is gonna go very far into the attack, and I'm not even going to mention the defense because you probably know what I'm going to talk about the defense of the Galaxy, where I've been repeating myself so much talking about how no matter what they try, it seems like they never figure out the defense. So something tells me that's going to be the same case again, where no matter the fact that they signed some players that hopefully can actually help the defense, it seems like most likely that is not going to be the case. But overall, what I think this Galaxy team is going to be is that, this first year under Greg Vanney, it's going to be tough, but I feel like eventually Greg Vanney is going to do what he did with Toronto, where I mentioned before that when he was with TFC in his first season, they did not make the playoffs. But then in the next couple of years, when Vanney was able to build the team that he likes, that team regularly make the playoffs and eventually become an MLS Cup contender too. I feel like if Vanney can do the same thing that he did with Toronto, but now with the Galaxy, that could be the case where even though this team might not make the playoffs right now, don't be surprised in the next couple of years they're going to be a regular playoff contender, or even maybe get back to a team that is considered an MLS Cup contender. Now, moving on into 10th place, I'm going to say the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, I know when I put the Whitecaps in 10th place, that kind of looked like it's a downgrade from what happened last season. It seems like maybe they took a step back in terms of the deep rebuild that they've been in for the past couple of seasons, because after all, they did finish 9th in the Western Conference and just barely missed the playoffs last season. But I want to put the Whitecaps here, and I also kind of want to take back what I said about how, this upcoming season, in order for them to continue the rebuild, they need to, of course, be a fringe playoff team. Well, with the way how the playoffs is and how this season, it seems like when we go back to the old playoff format, it's going to be even tougher to try to get in compared to any other season, because only half of the team in each of the conference actually make it. And in a Western Conference that is going to be very, very tough and also very competitive, you definitely need to have almost a very good squad to even maybe be a fringe kind of playoff team. And when I look at this Whitecaps team, yes, they did make some signings in the offseason to continue to improve, and I do like some of those signings that they made. But I think the big question with this Whitecaps team, and the thing that really makes me feel like they're not there yet in terms of potentially being a fringe playoff team, is that DP number 10 spot. Like, if they can get that DP number 10, and once they do get it, and that he proves that he is going to be the main distributor and pulling the strings of this team, then I think the Whitecaps could be right around this level where they're going to be a fringe playoff team. Now, that being said, as I mentioned, how I feel like the expectation of how this rebuild is going to improve is not actually make the playoffs this season, but it's actually more like they need to be a team that is fun to watch, and a team that could be actually in the playoff picture and potentially be that fringe playoff team. And we saw last season down the stretch they were that kind of team where they were able to play some fun soccer, especially be a team that is very dangerous on the counter attack, and able to also soak up enough pressure and not really kind of leak as much goals as we've seen earlier this season, to be a team that of course eventually find themselves almost on the cusp of making the playoffs. If they can do that again this season, I think it could also be a good progress in terms of their rebuild. But really, I think besides that, the other big progress in terms of the rebuild is going to find that key number 10 DP kind of player that they probably is going to once again look for heading into the summer transfer window. Now, moving on in ninth place, and I'm going to go with Austin FC. So this is right around the spot where I usually put expansion team in terms of their very first season when I make these predictions, because we know a lot of expansion team, when they come to MLS, they usually do not make the playoffs in the first season. I mean, unless if you are LAFC or Atlanta United, where they turns out to be two of the best expansion team in league history. That's just something that we don't usually see with expansion team. I mean, what we see with expansion team are either ones that is gonna somehow scrape themselves into the playoffs, like what we saw with Nashville and Inter Miami did, or it could be one where things could look absolutely terrible and they might need to tear it down again, as what we saw with FC Cincinnati and also Minnesota a couple of years ago. Now, for this Austin team, I mentioned how I do like their squad, and I do like the fact that this squad could actually have a chance to potentially on the cusp of making the playoffs. But I think what will determine whether or not if they can make the playoffs or not is if they can score enough goals and get enough contributor in that attacking end. So guys like Cecilio Dominguez, Rodney Redis, and also whoever is going to play that number 9 spot, if they can get going for this team, then there's no doubt this Austin FC team can definitely make the playoffs. I mean, we know that they have a decent midfield and decent defense, and they even have one if not the best holding midfield in the league in Alex Rank in their team. We know that that's going to be their strong point, but the question is still going to be around their attack. And right now I only put them in 9th place because I think maybe their attack is not going to be good enough where they're able to get themselves to be a team that maybe finish in the 6th or 7th spot. But if their attack can actually get going, then yeah, there's no doubt that I think they could definitely finish in those spots. And if it actually really gets going, then there's no doubt that they might even look like an expansion team that LAFC and Atlanta United was when they were entering the league in their first season. But now moving on into 8th place, and we're also getting to the part of the standings where these teams are going to be right on the bubble, and I think there could be a case where as we head into the final day of the season, Dallas is going to be in that conversation of making the playoffs. But as of now, I have them outside the playoff table, mainly because in that final game of the season, they play against the San Jose Earthquakes. And speaking of which, I'm going to actually put the Quakes right here in 7th place, because I really think that game looked like has a playoff decider written all over it in decision day. And because of the fact that game is going to be at home, and knowing the fact that the last time the Quakes had a game where they had a situation where if you win, you're in the playoffs, they were able to win that game. And I think it was against Minnesota, the one that they, of course, won to move on into the playoffs. And coincidentally, they were actually able to beat Dallas during that playoff race and during that crazy decision day situation to be able to make the playoffs. And Dallas, of course, missed the playoffs on the final day. And also that was the season that, I know I haven't mentioned this a lot, or I have mentioned this a lot before, but that was also the season when Dallas had that epic collapse and ends up not making the playoffs after they were in first place pretty much for the first couple of weeks of the season. Now, again, explain for me to explain why I think Dallas is going to just miss out, and also why the Quakes is going to make it, besides the fact that the fact that that decision day game can really determined. But for Dallas, when you look at this team, it definitely is another team where it kind of looks very similar to previous year, where there are a mixture of young guys coming out of the academy in the starting 11 and also veteran player from this team. And most of the time when that happens, usually what we see in the last couple of seasons is that this team usually are kind of like that fringe playoff team and kind of like right around the bubble of the playoffs. But at the end of the day, my other concern with this Dallas team is definitely, are they going to win enough away games where they can maybe put a little bit pressure off their home form to potentially make the playoffs. And also, so there's the other big question about the attack and whether or not, if some of these attackers like Franco Hara can actually stay consistent and not go on a cold streak randomly and then basically go back into a hot streak during one part of the period. But like I said, I put the Quakes in 7th place, besides the fact that I think that they probably, if that decision day game is going to be the decider of either them making the playoffs or Dallas making the playoffs as a 7th seed. For the Quakes, I think as long as if the attack that we of course decided to revamp a little bit by signing guys like Chofis Lopez, and also hoping that maybe Fierro, after what we saw from the latter part of last season, looked like he started to improve and started to be a great option in the wing area. And also, let's say if Wando is going to have one last great year by once again carry this team on his back, there's no doubt that this Quakes team can actually make the playoffs. And that's despite the fact that I feel like the defense is going to be something that is going to give up a ton of goals this season. And also, I would also say with this Quakes team, where as much as they have been very inconsistent, and as much as I know people have been saying that this might be an entertaining team to watch because you never know what you're going to get with the Quakes, I'm just hoping that this season maybe they could be a little bit more consistent and not have those roller coaster ride where they might win like 4-0 in one game, and then the very next game they lose like 6 or 7-0, or better yet, like last season where they had stretch where they were losing like 6-7-0 every single week, and then somehow in some way they started to get them back into good form to get themselves back into the playoff race. Hopefully that is something that we won't probably have this season, because as much as it's fun for the neutral, it's definitely not fun for me supporting this team and just having all this kind of roller coaster experience. But something tells me that probably is not the case, because we know this is how Almeida roll, and that this is just the full Almeida experience, where you never know what you're gonna get with this team. This team could be looking like the best team in MLS at one point, or it could also look like the worst MLS team at another week. But now moving on into 6th place, and I am going to predict Sporting KC to finish 6th place. Now, when I look at the Sporting KC side, the reason why I do rank them a little bit lower on the table, and I know last season they did finish first in the Western Conference, but when you look at how they were able to finish first in the Western Conference, when you also look at kind of the schedule that they had a lot of games where they were pretty much playing against easy team and get themselves able to be in first place of the table. And not to mention, I thought the Western Conference kind of had a down year last season, and some of those good teams were kind of tripping themselves at times last season to kind of allow Sporting KC that, I didn't think that they were really playing like a team that was a top team in the Western Conference, and yet they still somehow finished at that spot. Now this season, with the way that they're going to be playing against tougher opponent, and the fact that, I know at the end of the day, this Sporting KC team is definitely going to make the playoffs, because anytime when you have Johnny Russell, Gadi Kina, and Alan Polito on your team, that is always going to be that will always be a playoff team in my book. But the reason why I still rank them a little bit low is that the question of their defense, and that, I know the stats last year didn't show that this defense was a really big issue, but the playoffs really exposed boast in. Like, the playoffs really show that this defense was clearly not good whatsoever, and the fact that they did not do anything this offseason to trying to address that issue does make me wonder, are we going to be in for another year where Sporting KC might look good on the attacking end, but then on the defensive end they might leak some goals to pretty much blow games late in some of these games, and therefore causing them a chance to become one of those teams that maybe finish in the top half of the table. Now, moving on into 5th place in the Western Conference. And for 5th place, I am going to say it's going to be the Colorado Rapids. So the Rapids, with the main core that they, of course, secured this offseason, I have no doubt that if they can perform like the way that they did last season, they're going to be once again finished in 5th place in the Western Conference. Now, I still think this Rapids team is still a tier below of what I think I'm going to put the teams that finish in the top 4 in terms of quality-wise. I mean, I know this team definitely has some decent talent, and that they at times they can definitely play some very fun soccer, but it's just they're not really there yet in terms of this core kind of started to gel in and started to mature a little bit where they can really be an MLS Cup contender. But let's say if they can, maybe that of course is the case, or maybe even if they do continue to think about bringing another big time player into this team, maybe they are going to get into that tier where they could consider themselves not only be a regular playoff contender, but also an MLS Cup contender. But as you look at this team, they're still just a tier below that as of now. Now, in 4th place, I am going to say it's going to be Minnesota United. So, for this upcoming season for the Loons, I am taking a very cautious, optimistic state, and maybe right on point of kind of a pessimistic kind of standpoint when I look at this upcoming season for the Loons. I mean, I understand, yes, they finally figure out the big issue that they had to address this offseason, which is getting a number 9, and that, they finally got a big signing in Roman Wanchope-Abila, who I think he's going to definitely do very, very well, and that he's going to form a very good partnership with Reynoso. But the reason why I'm still going to be a little bit cautiously optimistic, and I'm still going to put Minnesota in the same position that they finished last season, is that I still feel like this attack still needs some more pieces to their team. Although I've heard that we were linked with a winger from Talleres down in Argentina, and it seems like he is going to probably sign with us, and I forgot what was his name, but he apparently will be signed with the Loons very soon, and he looked like he could be the replacement for Kevin Molino in that left wing spot. But even then, besides the fact that I still think this attack is a little bit thin going forward, I still think this could be a case where this team is a team where they are live by Reynoso and die by Reynoso. And what that basically means is that if Reynoso does get injured for this team, then this could be a real issue in terms of the attack. Like I think out of all these MLS teams that I see, I think Minnesota is one of those teams that their number 10 player is what really drives this team, and that if let's say Reynoso does get injured, or if he does suffer a little bit of a regression that compared to what he did last season when he came into the league, then there's no doubt that this attack is not going to be looking very well. But that being said, if Reynoso is able to be like what he was last season, and he's able to stay healthy, and all those attacking pieces actually turns out to be well, then no doubt that I think Minnesota could maybe finish higher than 4th place, and maybe even challenge the top 3, as I'm going to put them in this prediction video. So that being said, let us actually do so right now by putting the team that I think is going to finish 3rd place, and that of course I forgot who it was. It's this team, the Seattle Sounders. So I feel like this season for the Sounders, this is probably going to be something we saw a couple of years ago, where coming into this season, we know the Sounders have a lot of questions, especially on the attack, knowing the fact that they're not going to have Jordan Morris, and also probably not going to have Ladero for the first couple of weeks. And then there's also question about, during the international break and during Copa America, they're probably going to lose some of their international player. They could also be struggling during that point. But most importantly, they also lost some key pieces this offseason that might actually weaken this squad, and that you might think that this team could actually take a step back. Well, here's the thing. This was kind of something that they had back in 2017 and 2018, and you know what they did? They eventually grabbed a big name player in the summer and eventually went on a crazy resurgence and somehow finished in the top three or even in second place of the Western Conference. And I feel like this kind of scenario is pretty much written all over the Sounders this year. I really believe that this year, even with all those big players that they lost and even losing their sporting director, Chris Henderson, I still think they're going to find a way to maybe get off to a slow start. Maybe the Sounders might be somewhere on the right side of this board and kind of out of the playoff contention. But I will never count them out, knowing the fact that I know that second half resurgence is going to happen. And once it does kick in, this team somehow is going to finish in third place. And also, those teams that were kind of able to have a great second half season to get themselves back to be one of the best team in the Western Conference, those teams also made it to MLS Cup. So something tells me that they might also end up reaching MLS Cup again, which that is probably bad news for the rest of the Western Conference, and generally a bad news if you're an MLS neutral, because I know for a long time it's been kind of frustrated, the fact that the Sounders have always been the one that represent the Western Conference, and a lot of neutral would want to see someone new to represent the Western Conference in MLS Cup, and one of those teams that could potentially do so, and maybe the team that can finally end this reign where for the past couple of seasons, well, not the past couple of seasons, but really for the past 6 seasons, it's been either Seattle or Portland represent MLS Cup out of the Western Conference. But this team might actually finally end that streak, and another is LAFC, where I'm going to predict them to finish second. I mean, when you look at this team has every aspect of a team that is going to challenge for MLS Cup. And I know this does kind of sound like a cliche, and you kind of hear that from the media that kind of drill in your mind to say that they're always the best team in the league and that they are the MLS Cup favorite. But when you look at this team, there's really not a lot of weakness, maybe except the goalkeeping position, where there's going to be big question whether or not is it actually going to be Kenneth Vermeer that's going to be their regular starting goalkeeper, or is it going to be Sasiaga? And is it also going to be the case where it's like last season when they were kind of flip-flopping, and one game it's going to be Vermeer coming in as the goalkeeper, and one game it's going to be Sasiaga. But besides that, they are pretty much stacked going forward on the attack, and that they can even actually finish higher than second place if all those players that kind of play like the way that they had in the CONCACAF Champions League and during that run to the CCL final. Now, the thing that I do have some concern with LAFC besides the goalkeeping position is the fact that, let's say maybe in the summer transfer window, there's going to be a big club in Europe or even a big club down in South America that is going to maybe poach one of their better players, because we have heard rumors of Atuesta potentially could be signed with a big team down in Brazil. And we also have heard many times where Rossi has been linked with tons of teams in Europe, and a lot of those teams are going to pay upwards about 20 to 30 million to get them. And let's say in the summer transfer window, maybe eventually the price is right for LAFC to finally pull the trigger and actually cash in their asset. Well, it's great that they of course get that big sum of money in the summer, but that means those players no longer be your team, and it could actually weaken the squad. Now, I'm pretty sure LAFC probably have thought of this, and maybe that is the reason why, as much as a lot of club is going to come calling for some of their best player in the summer, they're going to be reluctant to trying to sell them, because they know that they, of course, want to make sure they hold on to the squad as long as possible, and at least until the end of this season. And if that, of course, is the case, well, maybe this next off season, that could be the time where some of the main player from this core is going to be sold off for a profit. And this also tells you why this team, this might actually be I wouldn't say the last year that they could be a serious MLS Cup contender, but definitely the last year where they have this kind of core and this kind of talent in their team to really chase an MLS Cup. Because if they aren't able to do so, yeah, there is definitely going to be concern whether or not if they're ever going to do so, especially once they sell off some of their better player heading into either this summer transfer window or heading into the winter transfer window next off season. But finally, the team that I think is going to finish first in the West is none other than the Portland Timbers. So we already saw what the Timbers did in the CONCACAF Champions League, and especially in those two-legged affair against Marathon, where their attack looked like they never skipped a beat from last season. I mean, this team, I think, no doubt, now the attack which we saw last season, besides LAFC, was the best attack in the league, and I have a feeling it's going to continue to be a very good attack. But besides that, one of the things that I also said about the Timbers that they kind of addressed that was one of their biggest weakness from last season is the defense of this team. I mean, some of the defensive acquisition that they made this season with the likes of Jose Van Reken and Claudio Bravo has really looked well in those CCL games, and if they can continue that form into these MLS games, then no doubt that they definitely might have addressed some of the issue that they had in the back line. Now, that being said, the other big weakness of this Timbers team is that they tends to always give up goals late in the game, and they're always, it just feel like the only reason why last season they weren't able to finish first place in the Western Conference and also weren't able to go deep into the playoffs is that they always have had lead goals late in the game. Well, if they can actually eliminate that habit, and that's obviously a big if, because last season they did it so much, it is still a huge question whether or not if this season they can easily just break out of that habit. But if they can actually break out of the habit, I have no doubt this Timbers team is definitely, they consider one, if not the best team in the Western Conference, and probably also have a very deep squad where when you look at this team, besides the main core that they also have a lot of depth piece that in case some of their main starters goes out, they can use some of their players that is in the depth chart, and they can come in and can continue to produce very well, and almost made you forgot that one of their start player was actually on the sideline right now. So yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for my Western Conference prediction video. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, since this is one of those video where I know I'm going to get some people in the comment section that's not going to be happy where I put your team in the table. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think some of the team I put here on the table, or one of the team that you support that maybe is on this side of the table, why do you think they shouldn't be on this side but instead on this side of the table, which is the side of the table where I expect these teams to make it to the playoffs. But yeah, hope you guys, as I said, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.